It didn't begin with bombs, it began with forms. In 1939, before World War II officially started, German families received letters from the state. The letters said their disabled relatives were being moved to special medical facilities, better care, better treatment, a chance to recover. Parents signed consent papers. Doctors approved transfers. Clerks stamped files. The decision had already been made. The program was called Aktion T4. Its purpose was simple: remove people the state defined as unproductive. No battlefield, no enemy army, only officers. Doctors reviewed questionnaire instead of patients. Names were reduced to categories: blind, epileptic, mentally ill, physically disabled. Red marks meant death. Blue marks meant temporary survival. Buses arrived with painted windows. Neighbors were told the glass was tinted to protect patients from stress. Inside the facilities, there were no treatments. There were rooms sealed like showers. Carbon monoxide was released. Death followed in minutes. Bodies were burned. Ashes were mixed together. Families received urns with the wrong names. Death certificates listed pneumonia, heart failure, natural causes. By 1941, over 70,000 people were killed this way. Not secretly, not chaotically, efficiently. The public began to notice. Smoke, questions, rumors. So the program was officially stopped. It wasn't stopped. It was decentralized. The same doctors, the same nurses, the same methods. They were transferred east. When the war expanded, the techniques perfected on the disabled were reused. Gas chambers, crematoria, record keeping. The people who designed mass killing did not begin with soldiers. They began with patients who could not resist. After the war, many of the doctors returned to practice. Some testified. Most were not punished. Aktion T4 was reframed, minimized, separated from the Holocaust in textbooks. It became a footnote, a preface nobody read. But the machinery of death didn't appear suddenly in 1941. It was tested quietly years earlier. The first victims of World War II were not soldiers. They were already inside institutions. By the time the war officially began, the system already knew how to kill. What followed was not escalation, it was reuse. When Aktion T4 was officially ended, nothing was dismantled. No buildings were destroyed. No personnel were removed. The system was simply reassigned. The doctors who had learned how to kill efficiently were sent east. The engineers who built sealed rooms were promoted. The clerks who perfected record-keeping kept their desks. They already knew how to move people without resistance, how to disguise killing as care, how to document death without calling it murder. The disabled had been the test run. In occupied Poland, new facilities appeared. Not hospitals, not prisons, centers designed for throughput. The first extermination camps did not invent their methods. They inherited them. Gas vans were deployed. Mobile chambers disguised as transport trucks. Victims were told they were being relocated. The doors were sealed. Engine exhaust was redirected inside. The paperwork looked familiar. So did the language. Special treatment, disinfection, resettlement. Words that had already worked once. By the time mass deportations began, the state did not need to experiment. It already knew how long it took to kill, how much gas was required, how to dispose of bodies, how to keep workers detached. The killing became routine. Schedules replaced urgency. Efficiency replaced secrecy. Entire populations were processed using the same logic once applied to patients in care homes. After the war, investigators traced the chain backward. They expected to find the origin in camps. They didn't. They found it in hospitals, in medical journals, in conference notes. The first gas chambers were not built for Jews. They were built for Germans. That fact complicated the story, so it was softened. Aktion T4 was described as an exception, an early mistake, a separate crime. The continuity was blurred. Many of the architects avoided trial. Some testified as experts. Some returned to civilian life. The files were sealed, then partially released, then summarized. What remained was a gap, a pause in the narrative where responsibility should have been. The war is often described as a descent into brutality, but the truth is quieter. The machinery did not descend, it expanded. What happened next was not madness, it was administration. And once a state learns how to kill efficiently, it does not forget. When the war ended, the killing stopped. The systems did not. Files were boxed. Institutions were renamed. Personnel were reassigned. Hospitals reopened. Clinics resumed work. doctors continued seeing patients. Many of the men who signed death orders now signed prescriptions. Investigators focused on the camps. They searched for uniforms, weapons, and mass graves. What they found in hospitals was paperwork, forms that looked harmless, language that sounded medical, decisions hidden behind procedure. So prosecutions narrowed. A few administrators were charged. A handful of doctors were tried. Most were not. Some claimed they were following policy. Others said the program had been legal at the time. Many testified for the prosecution against someone else. Courts accepted the distinction. Aktion T4 was treated as an isolated program. Finished. Contained. The continuity was ignored. The families received no explanations, no apologies, no corrections. Death certificates remained unchanged. Urns were never re-examined. Graves were not reopened. In textbooks, the story began later, with camps, with trains, with war. The disabled disappeared from the narrative. They did not fit the image of genocide driven by hatred. They were killed by classification, so they were excluded. In post-war Germany, memorials rose. Names were engraved. Dates were fixed. The first victims were rarely listed. Medical institutions reformed slowly. Ethics committees were created. New rules were written. But no system can undo what it has already proven it can do. The lesson was not erased. It was buried. Today, Aktion T4 is mentioned briefly, often separately, sometimes not at all. It survives as a paragraph, not as a warning, but the sequence remains. First, identify the unproductive. Second, normalize removal. Third, rename killing. World War II did not begin with war. It began with a decision about who was worth keeping alive. When the war ended, that decision was never fully reversed. It was archived.